The last time we have introduced the research, we learned about what is research, what research is not, what the real meaning of research. We also learn about the different types of research. We also learn about the different approaches of research. So I want to ask now, what can be the main approach when conducting a research? What are the main approach? When conducting a research, what are the main approach? No one. Let's revise together. What are the main approach when you have to conduct a research?
So let me try.
Okay.
The main approach is when conducting a research. We have qualitative analysis research and quantitative analysis research.
Okay, yes. That's the two main approaches that we have when conducting research. Quantitative and qualitative approaches. And now in qualitative approaches, what are we using? And then also in qualitative approaches, what are we using? So the type of data, I can say it like that, what the type of data, or also the method, or what are the differences between quantitative approach and qualitative approach?
Okay, so let me try.
Okay.
I think that qualitative research is mostly based on description. That is using non-numerical data. That is, we
Yes.
can use existing data in like laboratories or in the lab, or maybe patient document, for example. Whereas quantitative research is mostly based on numerical data, that is try to like to predict, maybe if you want to analyze, maybe a predict a phenomenal, that that is the common difference is mostly numerical and non-numerical.
Yes, that is it. Because in quantitative, we don't have a numerical data, while in quantitative we have numerical data. We have to conduct some kind of statistical analysis. That's also that statistical analysis. We have to test hypotheses also. While in qualitative, it's just sometimes it's just question is just describing something. Yes, that is it. And now, what are the maybe types of research that you know? The types of research. The types of research.
Yep. Types of research, I think we have experimental research, if I'm
Yes,
not wrong.
yes,
We
we have
have
it.
exploratory,
Yes,
we have descriptive.
okay.
Eh,
Who else? Who else can respond? We also have fundamentals research. We have applied research also. So those are just some types of research that we have. Okay. Today now we are going uh, to look about research problem, how to define a research problem, formulation of hypothesis, development. Let's look at we'll identify the problem. That's what will be the first module. The second module, writing research questions. The third module, hypothesis, types, and testing. Okay, the module 4 is not for now. That's for maybe another day. Okay, let's start with module 1. Module 1 here. Demonstrate. Let's start with this quote from Charles Catwin. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. If you don't state the problem, if you don't define the problem, if you don't know the problem very well, it will be very hard, it will be very difficult for you to solve that problem. You have, for example, to state the problem, you have to know the scope of the problem, to define it, what are maybe the variables, what are the, I can say, the goal, what are we trying to achieve, what is the gap, and so on. And once you have that definition, once you have stated the problem, once you know once you have gathered some kind of information about that problem, that is the beginning of your research like that. So every research starts by defining the problem. And in this approach, we have for example, we have the problem, we have researchable problem, and we have even non-researchable problems. For example, here, a problem is a general frustration or observation. It's just a symptom. For example, an application is not working well, and the application becomes just maybe the application is annoying. Yes, it's baggy. That's just a problem. Or maybe the traffic. When you are traveling, maybe the traffic. We have many problem on the traffic. That's just a general problem. Patient no shows as very high. That's also just a problem. Now here we have what we call researchable problems. Researchable problems. A researchable problem should be specific. That's first thing. Should be measurable or observable gap. Yeah, researchable problem should be specific, measurable, and observable gaps. Is the diagnosis. For example, here, why do users abandon the checkout cart? That's a problem like that. What the factors predict patient no shows? Okay, that's the same thing. The system is buggy. Nobody is signing up for the program and so on. That's just the problem. And if you observe maybe around you in the society, you will say or acknowledge a lot of symptoms, a lot of problems, a lot of challenges that human faces or maybe that you face. Okay. Now let's define, because I've said that we have researchable problems. First of all, we have problems that is observable, that is symptom, a situation, a challenge. That comes from our observation. Now we have researchable problems and we have non-researchable problems. Now we are about to define what is unresearchable. Unresearchable. Here you say that problems or questions that cannot be answered. Please, I don't know. I was saying that we have, first of all, problems. Now we have researchable problems and we have unresearchable or non-researchable problems. Yes. Now the definition, a question that cannot be answered through empirical investigation, data collection, and analysis. Their answers are based on subjective values, opinions, faith, or simple facts, not original research. The key category, we have 4 categories. The first category here is value-based and ethical judgments. We have metaphysical, we have metaphysical, or supernatural questions, simple information or how-to questions. We have vague or inaccessible topics. So let's look at that. For example, subjective and supernatural questions. Value-based ethical. Let's start with one example here. Is democracy a good form of government? Yes. If we have this kind of question, if we are to conduct a research based on it, it will just be opinions. Everyone will give his own opinion. If you try to ask to Cameroonians here, is democracy a good form of government? I think that many Cameroonians will say, I don't think so. But now, if you go maybe to United States, where we have advanced democracy, and you have, is democracy a good form of government? They will say to you, yes, of course, democracy is very good thing. So that is something that is based on opinion. If you go maybe to UK, there is monarchy, they will say to you that no, democracy is a lot of disorder, is bringing disorder everywhere. So that's not a good thing. So that is based only on opinion. The same for maybe should the second example here, should capital punishment be legal? Or who is the most beautiful woman? Yes, you see that we cannot conduct a research on that topic. I think that is the most obvious topic that we cannot conduct a research. Yes, who is the most beautiful woman? If you try to do that, only even just in Cameroon, I think we have what we call a Miss Cameroon here, but for many people, those who are elected sometimes are not that beautiful for them. So it's something that is based on the opinion of someone. So that is subjective. Now for metaphysical and supernatural, for example, we have questions like, does God exist? It is difficult to evaluate. How can we evaluate if God exists or not? I'm saying that based on scientific approach. Yes, based on scientific approach. How can we evaluate if God does exist? What happened to a person consciousness after death? That is even harder because we don't really know how we can go to the afterlife and now come back to give the feedbacks. That can be a kind of experience that no one will want to try. Yes, though that's non-researchable question. Now the last one, what's the meaning? What's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of life? So if you try to ask that question, some will respond in one way, and in other we respond another ways. Now we have practical and logical limits that are non-researchable. For example, simple information or how to. For example, what is the capital of Sweden? How do you change a tire? Yes, those have pre-existing answers found in reference material, so they are lookup questions, not research problem. We have here the second vague ambiguous question. Example, can crime be prevented? That is very general. That is too general. Do police affect delinquency? That's also too broad, too general to investigate on it. And now we have here problems with inaccessible data. When data are not accessible, it becomes very difficult to conduct a research. For example here, what really goes on inside a black hole with current technology? We never explored the black hole. I hope you know what is the black hole. We have never explored the black hole because the black hole, once an object of matter is absorbed, there is no way back. There is no way back. So we don't have data about what is happening inside a black hole. It's just kind of theories. Now we have seen we just looked about non-researchable problems. Now let's look about a researchable problems. Now the researchable problem is the diagnosis. It's the why. A researchable problem, like I said earlier, is a gap, a specific gap in the knowledge that, if filled, could help solve the symptom. Is what you look up or investigate. Yes, for example, what you look up or investigate. We have some example here. What specific UI elements cause user frustration? What's the root cause of the save feature bug? What are the main barriers to program sign up? Okay. Now, where can we find problems? We have three sources. Yes, where to find problems. We can find problems based on our personal observation. Based on our personal observation around you, you can observe on your environment. You can observe maybe at your place of work. You can observe something that is not working. Inefficiencies you see every day in your community, maybe in hospitals, maybe on your way going to work. For example, that's the problem. For example, I will observe that to take taxi here in Yaoundé is sometimes very hard. If you are not ate well, sometimes you will get tired because you have to propose and propose again. And sometimes the driver accepts you, sometimes he don't accept you. So it's sometimes difficult to find a taxi here in Yaoundé. That's one observation. That's a personal observation. For example, maybe also you have observed maybe something your place of work, maybe a problem somewhere. That is how we find problems, and that is how we find researchable problems. Now, we also find the second source is stakeholder feedback. Stakeholder feedback. For example, a user complaint, or maybe that's part of, maybe you are inside a company, or you are working for a hospital, and maybe the patient, you have the complaint from the patient, you have the complaint be from someone or another. Those are what we call feedback, patient surveys, app reviews, community meeting notes, and so on. Now the third the third source is academic literature. Sometimes we have some kind of paper that we call literature review. We call it a review. When you download the review, you will find at the end of the review some gaps, something that have to be done. Yes. Okay. We have an example of observation here. A public health nurse notices that patients from one specific neighborhood consistently miss follow-up appointments, even when they live close by. This is a symptom, and this is a problem. Now, she can try to find out why that is happening, and start a research about that. Is it just peculiar to that woman or that patient, or is it general? There's also, you have feedback. Yeah, there's another example. Okay, now we can have we can have the same problem, but different point of view or different lenses. For example, we have here the same problems seen from different approaches. We have here, for maybe public health, we have this waiting room is overcrowded, increasing infection risk. That's from the point of view maybe of someone that's doing his master in public health. While for someone this same problem, the patient check-in UI is poorly designed, causing a bottleneck. Maybe here you have to register before before the consultation by the medical doctor, and the result of the result of the poorly designed user interface make that we have a crowd here. We have a crowd here because they don't know how to fill, maybe to fill the form for their consultation. And now here we have the third lens, from the IT. The IT here, the check-in system server is too slow, causing a backlog. So we have the same problem. But we can have different type of solution. Here we can conduct one type of research in public health. We can conduct it. Here also we can conduct another type of research. The scale is the same here. So based on your background, you may have different approach in conducting a research. Now, we just look at how we can find problems. We have three avenues to find problems: observation, stakeholder, and literature. Now, to scope our problem, we use what we call the 5 Ws. who, the first one. We have what, we have where, we have when, and we have why. Who is affected by the problem? Is it an elderly patient? Is it a remote worker? What's the core issue? What's the core issue? Low adoption, maybe high error rate, and something like that. Now, where does it occur? Maybe in Yaoundé, maybe that case is peculiar to Yaoundé or Douala, maybe somewhere in Africa, in Asia, something like that. Now, when does it happen? When does it happen? And we have the last question, why does it matter? That's the most important one. What does it matter? It can be the high cost, the poor health outcomes, and so on. So whenever you want to scope your problem, you have to ask yourself those 5 questions. Who is affected? What's the issue? Where the issue is occurring? And when does it happen? And why does it matter? Nice. I was saying that the most important is the why. And the so what? So what factor? The why is your justification. And sometimes that is, if you want maybe to apply for a research grant, that will be the culminant point for the ULs. When you want to apply to a research grant, that's where you have to prove to those organizations that your project is worth to be funded. Yes, you have to prove by the why question. The why is the justification. You explain the impact of the problem and why it's worth the time and money to solve that problem. It usually relates to the cost, yes, the cost, the efficiency, the health, the security, and privacy. So that's about the why question. Okay, now how to state a problem. That's what we call scoping a vague problem. How to state a problem. What we call that is what we call problem statement. Here at our left, we have a vague problem. Our new health app is not working. That's very vague because we don't have the 5 W's here. We just know the problem. The app is not working. That is only the what question. Here, for example, that is scoped problem statement. We have elderly patients, that is the who, are not logging their daily vitals, that is what, in the new health application, that is where, leading to incomplete data for doctors and poor health monitoring, that is the why question. So whenever you want to write your problem statement, make sure those 4 questions, make sure to respond to those 5, let's say, yes, 5 questions. Let's look at another example here. A weak problem statement. We have our city's health is poor. That is very vague. That's very vague. Very, very limited. That's not how to state a problem. That is only the what. Now here we have low income neighborhoods in city X, maybe have 30% higher asthma related hospitalization rate during summer months, leading to increased healthcare costs. Okay, here we have the what 30% higher asthma related hospitalization rate. We have where the CTX here. We have who the neighborhoods, low income neighborhoods, that's who, and we have why. Why does that problem matter? We have because the problem is leading to increased healthcare cost. So maybe when you are writing your thesis and for that part problem statement, those are the 5 questions we have to that we have to say inside your statement. Okay, now any question before moving, because this is an activity problem workshop. Problem workshop. You will have to do that maybe during the week. You have to do that. But at this time, do you have any question? Any question?
No question, sir.
Okay, okay, let's move on. We move to second module, writing a research question. In the first module, where we look how to 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 find a problem, how to find a problem, and how to state that problem. Now, the research question, how can we from the problem statement, how can we have the research question or questions? Because we can have one or several research questions. From the problem, the question. The problem is the what, the question is the how or why. For example, here we have problem statement. The patient no show it at the downtown clinic is 30%. Now, some research questions that we can have is, what are the primary factors predicting these no-shows? Or another question that we may ask ourselves is, how can we reduce this no-show rates? Now, what makes a good research question? We have found what makes a good research question. First of all, a good research question should be feasible. Should be feasible. Most of the time, we don't have all our time or our life to answer a question. For a master, sometimes it's just 6 months. For a PhD, sometimes it's three years to 5 years. So you have a span, a limited period to answer that question. So is that feasible with your time and also with your resource? Will you be able to answer that question? That's the first. That's the first maker of a good research question. So whenever you want to have a research question, you should ask yourself, I am able to accomplish or to complete this work with the time and the resources that I have. That is feasibility. Secondly, a good research question have to be interesting. Have to be interesting. If the answer is non-obvious to you and others, that's an interest. That's an interest. So if something is already, if the answer is obvious, we don't have even to conduct research. That is like we said for how to questions. Yes. How, or maybe how to maybe how can we drive? The response is obvious. So that is not interesting. That's not interesting as a research question. So the research question should be interesting. Thirdly, a research question should be novel. Should be novel. Does your question, or does your research will add a new knowledge, even if just for your company? Does your research question will add a new knowledge? We can have we can have the same problem but different approach in solving that problem, and that means different research question. And now the knowledge that we will generate will also be totally different. Does it add a new knowledge? And sometimes for you to make sure that your research question will add a something novel, you have to do the literature. Yes, the literature, the review of the literature. Okay. Number 4, your research question should be ethical. Can it be studied without harming participants, for example? That's why sometimes when you are conducting how do we call it, a survey, you have to ask for the consent, or maybe in public health, you have to ask for the consent of the patient, or those who are answering your question, or those who are partaking to the research, or to the experience. That is the ethics. And finally, your research question should be relevant. Does the answer matter? Does it solve the why? The why that we ask ourselves in the problem statement. Okay. Now we will look at the different types of research questions. Yes, that's I know we don't have only it's not only 3 main types. We have more than that. The different types of research question. Okay. To categorize the research question, the research question is directly linked to the approaches of the research, to the approaches. If you want to conduct a quantitative research, you will have to ask, Okay, if you have a research question that will lead you to a quantitative research, you will have a quantitative you will conduct a quantitative research. Yes. So we just have two main types of research question, either quantitative or qualitative. Also, yes, we can also have mixed research question that is both quantitative and qualitative. Now, that is the same thing we have seen the last time. So, inside quantitative research question, we have three subtypes: descriptive, comparative, and relationship. So here we have the quantitative, to be precise, structured, and measurable numerical data to test hypotheses. That's crucial for it. We have numerical data and we have statistical analysis. Now, the descriptive, the goal of descriptive research is just to measure or describe the characteristics. For example, here we have what is the average daily use of YouTube among children. That will be just descriptive. We will gather maybe a lot of data available on the web, and now we can analyze those data based on the age and just describe what we found. Now, comparative research question, we have to find differences between two or more groups. That is where we have, for example, we compare group A to group C, group A to group B and D, and so on. Do men and women have comparable metabolic rates? That is one example. Do men and women have comparable metabolic rates? That's an example of comparative research question. Now, relationship research question. In relationship, we explore the association between the different variables. For example, here we have what is the relationship between work environment and turnover rates, or maybe you have observed infant mortality rate, and you ask yourself what is the relationship maybe between the rates of malaria and infant mortality rate increase. That's also a relationship question like that. Okay, we have already looked about this descriptive research question. The relation to connect the dots. Causal research question. That's okay. Now, for the qualitative research questions, they are open-ended, flexible, and aim for in-depth insights into experiences and perspectives. That is how and why. That's why I say that most of the time qualitative research are used in many social sciences. They are using qualitative research approach. Here, for example, we have exploratory, which investigate little known areas without preconceived notions. An example here is What strategies do users employ to navigate new app features? That's one of example. We have explanatory, examine the reason, the why. Why does that phenomena occur? And then we have interpretive research question, which understand shared experiences within a natural setting. How do patients experience the process of recovering from surgery? So, for those qualitative research, most of the time we don't gather numerical data. We gather some kind of, we can say, opinions like that. Yes, we gather tests, and we have to analyze those tests or opinions. Okay, we have also other classification of research question. We have causal research questions, predictive questions, and action-based questions. The first one here, we have to determine if one variable causes an effect on another. That's experimental. Effect, we have to causal, we have to know the cause of something. Predictive is to understand the future outcomes or trends. Now that is what is done with data science, and so also with deep learning, AI, and so on. And action-based questions to identify practical steps to solve a specific problem. That is, most of the time, experimental studies are using action-based question. Okay. For summary, the type of question defines the methodology and data collection approach. And we have two main types. We have qualitative, we have quantitative, and we can also have the mixed approach research question. Okay, here's an example of research questions. Descriptive, we have here descriptive research question. What are the perceived barriers to clinic attendance for teenagers? What are the perceived barriers to clinic attendance for teenagers? To conduct this research, you will have to interview those teenagers. Yes, you have to interview them. And based on that interview, you will describe, you will give a report about what you discovered. That is descriptive. Relational. Is there a relationship between distance from clinic and attendance rates? Do we have, for example, for this kind of question, you will have, for example, to gather numerical data. For example, here we have the distance and we have the attendance, maybe over a period of time. And at the end, you will have to do some statistical analysis. And I think that for this one, it should be to see, do we have a relationship? If it's sometime to test the relationship, we have the Pearson correlation. Pearson correlation. We can have a Pearson correlation coefficient. We can have the student test to see if something is correlated to another one. Now, for causal, does offering free bus passes increase the attendance rate for this group? That is also quantitative approach. We have to conduct it, and we have to measure it and test the hypothesis. Have some statistical test on the data. Okay, that's the second activity. You will find you'll find this document on Moodle, so make sure you complete those activities. Okay, now the third module are hypothesis types and testing. The first module was how to find the problem. Second, the research question. Now, once you have your research question, you have to give the hypothesis and how you will test those hypotheses. Now, causal research question asks a question about cause and effect. Then, okay, hypothesis. What is an hypothesis? An hypothesis is just a specific and testable prediction. Simple like that. Hypothesis is just a specific and testable prediction. For example, here we have the research question here. Does the new UI design improve user engagement? Now, the first hypothesis here is the new UI design will result in a higher average time on page than the current UI. That is a testable prediction based on this research question. So just mark it like that, specific and testable prediction. Now, hypothesis is a formal, testable statement that predicts the relationship between variables. It's based on your prior knowledge or observations. It must be clear and specific, testable, which is measurable, and falsifiable. You must be able to prove it wrong. We are looking how we can write our own hypothesis. The first thing, you have to identify your variable to write your hypothesis. Since hypothesis is relationship, is a statement on the relationship between your variables, you have to identify your variables. And now inside your variables, you have to know which one are independent and which are dependent variable. What is independent variable? The one you change or manipulate, those are independent variables. independent variables cannot be altered when another variable is changed or when we vary another variable. That is an independent variable. The independent variable also is the cause. It's the cause. For example here, for the example we just had the type. For example, the type of UI, new versus old. The type of reminder, SMS or phone. If that is what we are manipulating. Now, the dependent variable is the one we measure to see the effect. The effect, in fact, is the effect. That's the dependent variable. Here we have, for example, the user engagement, the appointment adherence rate. So, if we vary the independent variable, we'll have a variation of the dependent variable. So you have to identify which of your variables are independent, which one are dependent. Here's another example. We have here the research question. Does an SMS reminder reduce patient no-show compared to phone calls? That's a research question. And this research question, we can identify what are we trying to measure. We are trying to measure the patient no-show. For example, we are trying to measure this patient no-show. Now, that means that will be the dependent variable. What are we doing to measure that patient no-show? We are changing or swapping between SMS reminders and phone calls. That's why they are the independent variables. The reminder type, either SMS or phone calls. Okay, this is another example. Yeah. Does a green buy button increase clicks more than a red one? What do we want to measure here? We want to measure the increase clicks, means that will be the dependent variable, the click rate. That is what you are seeing here, dependent variable. And now, what are the independent? The independent is what is varying. The independent is the color of the button. The thing will change. That's the independent variable. Okay. In research, we assume that a new idea is innocent, having no effect, until we find enough evidence to prove it guilty, has an effect. That is what we call null hypothesis. One of the core concepts, the concept of hypothesis testing. Okay, that was to introduce the different type of hypothesis. We have two types of hypothesis. We have null hypothesis and we have alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is the innocent play. The default position states there is no effect. There is no effect nor or no difference. Now, for the null hypothesis here, there is just another example. There is no difference. We have seen that that research question about the click rates according to the color of the button. So now the null hypothesis will be stated as there is no difference or relationship. It can be also relationship. There is no difference in click-through rates between the green button and the red button. That is the null hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis. We all know that almost all the websites that are selling something, yes, the e-commerce websites, they are using a green button. Yes, they are using a green button for pay out or check out, something like that, to visit your shop. So we all know that it's not something they have studied it. And they found that the green button has a higher click-through rate than the red button. That is something in the mind of many people. We know that green is a color of, can say, abundance. Green is compared to red, for example, red can means danger. You have also sometimes red light, which is danger. Green light, which is yes, you can go, you can pass. Nothing, safety. Yes. So we have the alternative hypothesis here. The green button has a higher click-through rate than the red button. So that is your prediction based on your observation. Like I just said, we know that almost all our e-commerce websites are using a green button. So it's what we are hoping to find, and we will test this alternative hypothesis also during the research. Now, that is just the summary. Here we have non-directional. There is predicts a difference, but not which way. Less common, that is less common but strong. That is non-directional null hypothesis. Yeah, the SMS rate will be different from the phone rate call. There's also an alternative hypothesis here, which is non-directional. So we can inspect or approach the problem in the two ways. Maybe by trying to look at the SMS, or maybe we can try to look at the phone call. So that is non-directional. Here we can have also alternative hypothesis, which is directional. So we have to predict the direction. That is for causal research question, for example. Yes, causal research, that is stronger. We want to know the cause. For example, here, SMS rate will be lower than the phone call rate. That is one direction. Okay, now we have null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, and we have to test those hypotheses. The goal in testing the hypothesis is not to prove that is not to prove the alternative hypothesis. That is the first thing you have to understand. You are not to prove the alternative hypothesis. If you gather enough statistical evidence to reject the null hypothesis, yes, that means you have proved the alternative hypothesis. So meaning that in research, we are just most of the time we are just testing the null hypothesis, assessing the degree of significance or the degree of difference, and we are using what we call the p-value. And when the p-value is less than 5%, that is the default value. When the p-value is less than 5%, we say that there is no meaningful differences between, for example, if it was a research, a cause to effect research, you can say that there's no differences, or X though is not the cause of Y, for example. That's why you see here, if you successfully reject the null hypothesis, you find support for your alternative hypothesis. And at the end here, if you don't have enough evidence, you fail to reject the null hypothesis. So the objective in testing the hypothesis is to reject the null hypothesis. It's not to prove that your alternative hypothesis is correct. Once you have rejected the null hypothesis, you already proved that the alternative one is correct. That's even its name, alternative. Common testing method, that's just a preview. We'll look further at it. We have the three common testing method: A/B test or ACT. We have survey and analysis. That's also another way test. And we have controlled lab study. Those are the common testing methods to prove to test our hypothesis. Okay, that's the third activity. Hypothesis formulation. Pick your causal research question, define the variables, and write hypothesis. Okay, we don't. I'll say that we don't have this module today. We don't have this module today. That module 4, is for another day. So you have to take to complete those activities. We have 3 activities according to the for each module. We have 1 activity for each module. So it's 3 activities that you have to complete, and it's very simple. Any question for today? I think that we are done for today. I don't know if you have any question.